So, good evening. First item on the agenda, call to order. We've done that. Minutes from July 11, 2023. Is there a motion?
Move to approve, subject to modification.
Is there a second?
A second.
Going through page 1. Page 2. Page 3.
Under 11, the second line, it says the town needs to hold a vote on allowing retail sales. I think it should say before allowing retail sales.
Yeah, but the town would need to hold a vote allowing retail sale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, right above that on that third bullet, it says under land, select the land acknowledgement. I didn't know what that third bullet meant. Can we just strike it? I don't think it.
Yeah.
Just strike the third bullet. Statements are typically made at the conclusion of discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Page 4. So, all those in favor of adopting the minutes with the modifications, say aye.
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 Those nay. The ayes have it. Public comment. This is the portion of the select board meeting where people may make comment on pretty much anything. It can be what's on the agenda, although you might want to wait until that agenda item comes up, but you don't have to. But anything at all. Is there anybody in the room that wants to know? Eric, is there anybody online?
Nope.
Interviews and appointments.
We've got Timothy Allard for the Recreation and Parks Committee. He's going to join us over Zoom. I see you, Tim. I'm just going to get you connected here, make you a panelist. You can share your audio and video. Tim, you're just muted.
How's that?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Hello, Tim.
Okay, wonderful. Hi. Sorry, I'm used to going from my computer, not my phone.
It's working just fine. So
Okay.
Thanks for your interest, and I'm wondering if you could give a little blurb or description about yourself and why you're interested in the position, and then the board may have some questions for you.
Sure, absolutely. One of the biggest reasons I'm interested is because I live here in Williston. I have small children, my youngest being 4, and we partake in a lot of the rec programs. Right now we have 3 school-age kids, 4, 7, and 9, and we've been into the rec soccer, rec basketball, and we take advantage a lot of the services. So I've done a lot of volunteering in my time. I was with Essex Junction Fire Department for 10 years. Before that, I lived up in the Northeast Kingdom and was on their fire department for 5 years. I've run rescue, and now I just try to spend most of my time doing stuff with the kids between that and my business. And so I figured what better way than to get involved in something that they're involved in.
Okay, thanks. I'll open it up to members of the board if anybody has any questions for Tim.
I'm obviously you're very familiar with the recreation and parks programming and things. What would you see as kind of your biggest goals or the things you are most interested in working on as part of the committee?
I think the biggest thing is just taking, the Williston Rec Department to the next level. I know that Todd's been doing a good job at implementing a lot of new stuff, and there's a lot of new programs, new facilities, and just playing a part in that and helping guide and steer that part of things as we continue to grow and the community grows, and looking at more facilities, more opportunities for the public. So I'd love to play a part in helping move that forward.
Can you say a little bit about rec opportunities outside of the school-age kid realm? Do you have any ideas or thoughts on those?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's already a lot of stuff around here. I mean, like we're over at Truckin' Tuesdays tonight. That's why I'm not there in person. But because it's been rained out the last 3 weeks, so the kids have been wanting to be over here. But yeah, I think trying to figure out how that works. I mean, it really depends on each person. I think it's a great thing to have, the jazzercise, the other events that it may be difficult for some of us to partake in. But I think just in general, I mean, previously, many years ago, but I worked with the Agency on Aging when I lived in the Northeast Kingdom and did a lot of things with them. And, obviously keeping everybody, whether it's young or old, moving and engaged and interacting and getting out and being social with other people in the community.
I did have one other question, not quite sure how to phrase this, but local business owner, you don't have to tell me what business it is if you don't want to. I'm trying to assess, I'm just trying to assess conflict of interest.
Yeah, no, so I run a fully electric lawn care service. We do snow plowing. And then we're actually acquiring a small local contracting company. And so pretty much in the service industry.
So you don't see any situation where you could be advocating for or against something from a personal point of view?
I don't think so. I try not to mix my business and personal anyways. I try to keep things separate, but I mean, I'm pretty good at separating the two. I mean, I own a couple apartment units over in Essex, and I'm also on the board at that HOA, and I'm also the one that provides the service. And when they voted me on the board, I told them, I said, look, if there's ever anything that's a conflict of interest, I will step aside because, I don't believe that's something that should be a case, and so I don't foresee where there would ever be a situation where that would be a matter, but if it was, I certainly would do my best to make sure that, I stepped aside and didn't involve myself in those matters, because it really needs to be something that the public makes the decision on, that I don't influence anything that would benefit me personally.
Thank you.
Unless it's maybe getting a pool for the kids. I'd advocate for that.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. Tim, thank you.
Yeah.
And looks like this is the only applicant. So that being the case, Chair would entertain a motion.
I'd move to appoint Timothy Allard to the Recreation and Parks Committee for an unexpired term, 3-year term through June 30th, 2026.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Okay.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Next, Howard Center Community Outreach overview. Mr. LaValle?
Yep, I've got him on Zoom.
Okay.
I'm connected in Chief Foley
Yeah.
join the conversation as well here. So
Chief, you
Scott,
want to come up?
Scott, I'm going to connect you here. Just make you.
We all want to do that sometimes.
You're connected, Scott, just have to enable your camera and your.
There, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know why can you see me?
Can't see you.
Okay, I'm not sure what, my camera's just taking a while to load. Guess in the context of things, the camera is the least important part, I guess.
Do you want to wait a little bit more, or do you want to start your presentation, Scott?
No, I can start. I mean, as long as you guys can hear me, that's fine. I'm not sure, and by the time I figure it out, you guys will probably be ready for me to finish stop talking. So, and yeah, I've done a few of these within the 9 towns. And I started off one. I had this kind of, thing set up, and I realized that the select board meetings, you guys got a lot of stuff to get to. It's usually late. So for me, I'm grateful I could do it on Zoom because I live about an hour away. So I was able to, go home and have dinner and then come here. So technology is kind of, it's a nice benefit today. So I basically just have like a quick outreach elevator kind of presentation, just kind of hitting some high points, and I guess redefining in the context of how we're going to moving forward, what that really means. What does outreach mean? So our operational definition is going to be it's outreach. It's it's an activity of providing services to people who might not otherwise have access to those services. So when the members of our community outreach team are out in the communities, they're far more accessible than a clinician sitting in their office that the person that would engage in services needs to find their way there. Ultimately our goal is to try and connect them to more long-term services, but look at outreach as a way to kind of bridge that gap. Try to take people that are struggling and kind of make the services a little more accessible. So, what we're kind of looking at is to try and make sure we're as efficient and effective as possible, and try to really, be, responsible and respectful with the resources we have, right? So the funding we get from DMH, the funding we get from the towns, we want to really, really focus on being as effective and as efficient as possible. So when we look at that, our core elements of our program we're looking at, we want to be, systematic. We want to have, a process to how we're operating. We don't want to just be, driving around hoping we have contact with someone, right? And we want to be coordinated. We want to be comprehensive. So, anyone we bring on board from a staffing perspective, we're kind of looking for that multi-tool, right? That Swiss Army knife that has, a little bit of knowledge about a lot of things. So social services, housing resources, food resources, domestic violence resources, trauma-informed resources, not just someone that has a specialty in one specific thing. So it's a challenging team to fill vacancies on, because you're really looking for someone that, is kind of comfortable, a lot like, law enforcement. They don't have control over the situations they're going to. And you kind of got to be ready for a little bit of everything. But we want that. We want to be comprehensive so we can be as helpful as possible. From our perspective, we want to try and be person-centered. whatever that person's needs are. We want to try and, have as much of a focus on addressing those needs, in the context of making sure everyone's safe. But we want to try and help that person solve whatever their immediate problem is. And we want to be we want to be informed about the effects trauma has on people, and we want to be responsive in that regard, in how we deal with people. I think that is probably one of the bigger values we have, particularly when we co-respond, trying to slow things down a little bit when it's possible. And then we want to be culturally responsive, culturally informed. And that just doesn't mean like ethnic culture. There's different variations of like, people that are struggling with, housing security. There's like little pockets of culture that form within those groups. And we want to be kind of as informed and responsive to those like nuances as possible. Right. And ultimately we really want to have, our emphasis is always going to be on safety and harm reduction. Out there interacting with people, in the moment, that's ultimately, because if we can keep people, from, keep people safe, keep ourselves safe, and then hopefully anyone in proximity to situations, and if they're not, acute situations at the time, helping kind of enhance people's safety by connecting them to the appropriate resources. And then like harm reduction, if we can limit the harm that people are doing to themselves or they're doing to the community, right? If they're being disruptive or whatever, it gives us a kind of a better platform to help them move forward. I always look at, and a lot of the conversations I have with the team center around like, people are having a bad day. Can we, will our intervention keep that from becoming something that's life altering for someone, right? So, if they're having, if they're dysregulated, angry at something, upset, whatever the case is, or even, under the influence of something, those situations, and I'm sure, Chief Foley can kind of speak to this, is those situations can turn very, very bad very quickly. And, our hopes are sometimes is if we are intervening appropriately, we can take a situation that's bad and, at the very least, keep it from getting worse. I think that's a lot of times that's a similar, approach that the police officers have is situation's already bad. Can we just, keep it from getting any worse? Can we keep it from, altering people's lives through either someone getting in an accident, getting hurt, someone getting arrested and going to jail, heaven, forbid, anyone gets, killed or dies. Those are kind of like the ultimate, things that we're looking at to try and keep things back to where they're still manageable, where we can still work on things and we can still help people. Because when some of those more severe things happen, it's really hard to help people at that point. Their life has really taken a turn. So whether that's, an overdose or a suicide attempt, a lot of those things we're looking at. And, that's the higher end acute work that the folks do. But, we wanted, I guess that's a lot of, we talk about that a lot because those are the ones that are really life altering for some people and for communities. When I know we had the incident in Colchester a few months ago with the murder suicide, and that's just tragic and not that we can always intervene in those cases, but when we can, it's good, right? So we're kind of like, I guess, hyper aware of those things, right? Because they make the news. But I think a lot of the work that we do, it's really hard to conceptualize what it prevents. Because if you're doing it, you just have no idea of knowing what the impact is sometimes on people. So the other aspect of what we want to try and do a little bit going forward is promoting public awareness of not only the program and some of the ways that we want to, seek to continue to do good work, but also to seek to be flexible with the changing needs of communities, and ultimately just kind of keep improving what we do. But also whatever's relevant to communities. So if they have initiatives going on that are related to substance abuse or mental health, we want to try and make ourselves available and be a resource. So for instance, one of the towns has a resilience initiative, and we have a screening of a movie we're going to show, and then we'll have a panel discussion. So at that particular community. So if they get 15 people show up, or we do it Zoom, which I'm sure we would do it live in Zoom. And if some people watch it, we have a little panel discussion. We're just kind of trying to put helpful information out there as part of the program to kind of add to what we're doing to try and benefit the outreach work. And that's different for each community. So one community was resilience. There's another community they're really looking at, cultural diversity stuff. They have a lot of different cultures within the community, and how do we meet their needs. So we help try and put something together and be part of those outreach programs that are already going on within those communities. So we're looking to do a little more of that. And I would say I was going to give an update. If everyone knows, we run quarterly data, and it comes off raw, basically from all the documentation that everyone on the team does. I take that raw data and then I turn it into what we send out. I'm working on that right now. I really hope to be done with it this week to get it sent out to all the town managers and chiefs of police. And then I'll start working on the annual data for the fiscal year and get that sent out too. As of right now, a lot of the data I've been pulling and putting together looks remarkably close to what it did last quarter, enough to the point where I started over because I was worried I was making a mistake. So I don't know if that provides enough information, but it's very similar to last quarter as far as the number of contacts we're having with each town. And then I also wanted to kind of I know Chief Foley's here. I wanted to kind of thank the Williston Police Department. They provided a couple trainings since I've been on board in February. And our teams have come out and done situational awareness trainings, involving how just to be aware of what's going on around you, how to try and just basically information to help everyone on our team kind of stay safe and be aware of what's going on around them when they're interacting with law enforcement on a scene, and when they're just out in the community interacting with people that have made referrals or called us themselves. So I really appreciate that because it just gives us more information and training to work with, because we want everyone on our team to be safe too. So, and that's what I got. If there's any questions.
Well, before we get to that, actually, Chief, could you weigh in on how the department interacts with the community outreach folks and the impact that they have? And
well, it's very well received by the officers of the department. The unfortunate thing is everybody believes that mental health is a 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 problem when it's actually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I know outreach has somebody that does late nights up to 8 o'clock. But again, after 8 o'clock, we're limited to what we have, other than if we take them to the emergency room, or, hopefully maybe, we can reach out to state police if they have one of their embedded social workers working that night to help us out. But it's a constant thing, and they've been very receptive. They show up when we need them. It's just that, he was saying, is that it's the people that need help have to be willing to want the help. And it's such a revolving door. They're programmed to say the right things at the right time. You know, we had 2 back-to-back overdoses this afternoon, and both of them didn't want to go to the hospital, didn't want to be seen by EMS. They said they were all right, they're talking to people, and out the door they go, and we're limited to what we can do. A couple of weeks ago, we had a lady that was camped out in front of the state police barracks on Williston Road. And we did, I think, 2 or 3 interactions with her, various officers, various people. We had interpreters because she alleged that she didn't speak English. We found out later on that she did speak fluent English. But we offered help. She didn't want help. She argued with us, trying to get her into a hotel. We're limited what we can do because we can't go hands-on. Unfortunately, a few days later, the state police ended up dealing with her because she was sweeping the off-ramp of exit 12 and wouldn't get out of the roadway. So, but you know, when we need them, they're there. It works. We've helped them out in training. It's like Scott was saying, is that we get people that work well with us and then they leave. You know, we're losing Rachel now. Rachel is leaving the group, and you know, she's been there quite a few years, and everybody really liked her, and she was part of. She sat on the Criminal Justice Council, and she was embedded in doing the works. But it's just, you know, I think down the road we really need to either expand the unit to increase more hours for them. But I think it's got to be just not a limited service of, you know, the police and the outreach, or police, fire, and outreach. The community's really got to get together, and the communities, it's not just limited to Williston, but it's the group that we have buying into this, that we really need to say, you know, we need to increase the amount of outreach people we have, and look at maybe adding clinical people to work with us, maybe on an on-call basis, you know, but it's just, you know, we need to try to, you know, stem the flow of the illicit narcotics coming into these people, because they're robbing everybody through all the businesses. It's a daily thing. You know, we can predict the day and time when it starts. Some days it's earlier than we anticipate, and then we run the whole day. You know, some days what happened, I don't know. Either they missed the bus coming out here or what, but it's a strain on everybody. And, you know, with us being, you know, 4 positions down, everybody has to really pick up the slack, and you're going to case to case to case. So it's nice to have them, that we believe that maybe we shouldn't go there, but we should have them go there. But we want to make sure they're safe, because, you know, if you look at every time we go to somebody and we bring their name up on the screen, there's questions because they have, you know, knives, they have needles. We had one last week where it was an overdose, and the person had a loaded syringe in his pocket. You know, so that jeopardizes us, EMS, the employees, and all that. So that's what we're dealing with. So,
Questions from the board for either Scott or the chief?
I commend our police department for the work that they're doing. I think they're overloaded with, you know, having to react to all these situations. They're unable to be proactive. I think most of the mental health institutions in the state have closed. Now, you know, now it's out on the streets. You know, it's a difficult situation.
I would thank you to both, to Williston PD, to you, Chief, to Scott, and I appreciate from both, you know, parties, from Howard Center and from the PD, the willingness to learn and to grow together and to be responsive to, you know, just the changing you know, needs of the community, and really recognizing that, you know, maybe different approaches are called for in different situations. And I really, you know, that's so valuable. And I think, you know, we're all better as a community because, you know, you all are willing to do this, and because we have Howard Center also supporting folks. And I hope, you know, that you know, we all take it to heart that what you're saying, that this isn't an 8 to 4 thing. This is, you know, mental health emergencies, mental health needs arise all the time. I know we are looking as a town, you know, and doing a study, looking within our police department. And so, you know, hopefully this is part of that, looking at that and how we can, you know, what our needs are there and how we can reinforce our police department and support, you all better in this avenue as well. So.
Yeah, and to the Chief's point, that's one of the things I'm looking at is, as we move forward, how do we take the program and expand it to, 7 days? Can we do it 7 days? Can we do it in a way that's, feasible and sustainable? Because we have to pay people. So the more people we have, the more we have to, the more costs. I think the return on the investment, I think, is there, right? I said, but it's really hard to demonstrate sometimes to get everyone's buy-in because when you're trying to work in that world of preventing things, it's really hard to prove a negative, right? So, but looking at the current resources we have, I'm trying to figure out if there's ways that we can move to 7 days. It's probably unlikely we'd be able to get to where we're working overnight, but if we could run, like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week, that might be a little more helpful, covering some of those times. I know there's some changes there's a mobile RFP, that's supposed to start up, I think in October, and then a hard start in January, which is going to change. It's going to change the way first call responds. So they should be more accessible. And then, because the outreach team, our focus is supposed to be on, kind of prevention, getting out and trying to be more proactive. And someone mentioned it earlier too, and I think, police officers try to do the same thing when possible. But it's really hard, as the chief said, they're down 4 officers, and it's really hard to put the resources into being proactive when you're just trying to keep up. And I think it's safe to say on both accounts from, the outreach team and from police officers, it's hard work. I think Rachel's a testament to that. She's extremely effective and great at her job. She's been doing it for about 6 years, and she's like, I've had enough, right? So, and how do we kind of, reduce the impact it has on the individual? I think police officers feel the same thing. There's towns across the state that are struggling to keep officers, and I think it probably falls in the same line. It's just it's a lot. It's ongoing. It's nonstop. It's a lot of kind of like Groundhog Day. It's like we're doing a little bit of the same stuff every day. It's really hard to keep up with. And then for Rachel and the team, and then whoever replaces Rachel are doing that. I'm trying to come up with from a more objective standpoint and trying to help come up with ways can we get better more coverage? Can we what are the resources that are out there? That's a lot of things for like any type of crisis work. You see those repeat same people or similar circumstances, fairly often. And it's either, a lot of times it's their unwillingness or their lack of awareness that they need to make changes in their life to improve. And then sometimes it's just simply the resources aren't available. And a lot of times one kind of feeds into the other. If the resources aren't available and someone sits on a wait list for 6 months, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to bother at this point. So it's hard work. But I do appreciate, not just Williston Police Department, but I think all the towns, as Chief alluded to, is it's like, people that are struggling don't really know boundaries. They'll be in Williston, come out on the bus in the morning, and then, later on that day they're in Burlington. So, trying to keep up with everyone. It's it's a lot of work. So I appreciate the collaboration, because if we weren't, if the team wasn't receptive with the officers, and it just wouldn't work. So that gives us the opportunity to try and be helpful. And I guess our goal is to try and continue to find ways to be more helpful. So.
Great. So thank you. If there are any final quick questions, we do have a public hearing that we have to open up, but
If appropriate, I might be interested in seeing the presentation, if you could just share it with us, so I can look at it offline. Your note said that he had a presentation he was going to share. If this was just talking through it, then I'm fine, but if there was...
Yeah. Sky, did you have some slides you wanted to share that you could email me, or if it,
No, I just had, all I had was some bullet points to keep myself on track, so I didn't go on a tangent.
no problem. Thank you.
Okay, great.
all right. Thank you. And thank you for everything. And please pass our board's thanks on to the people who do the work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Chief.
Public hearing. So ordinance or statute, I have to read the first paragraph of the notice. We'll open the hearing. The Williston Selectboard will hold a public hearing to receive comment on proposed amendments to the town's temporary events ordinance being considered. The public hearing will take place on Tuesday, July 25, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. in the Beckett McGuire Meeting Room of the Williston Town Hall located at 7900 Williston Road, with remote participation offered using online platform Zoom, with access information listed at the bottom of this hearing notice, which does in fact list that. So we will open the hearing up. Eric, is there an initial presentation, or?
I can give a general overview.
Yeah,
if the
please.
chair's like.
Yeah.
So this ordinance was adopted last year to create a system for events to be permitted, which don't make sense to go through zoning. At the time, it replaced the town's public festivals ordinance that was put in place in the early 1970s, and we found that needed some modernization at the same time. We have a system in place for town events through this ordinance for event review that primarily enables a lens of public safety to occur and conditions of approval to be put in place as the event has an effect on our public infrastructure. For example, parking in the public right of way, making sure good plans in place so emergency vehicle access is not affected, for example. Our town goal for this ordinance is to help events occur in a safe and responsible manner in regard to how they are affecting the surrounding area and their neighborhood. After having this ordinance in place a little over a year, staff identified some possible amendments for the board to consider. The board heard a presentation on those possible amendments through a couple select board meetings. We wanted the hearing for this evening. These amendments include, and these are posted as part of the hearing packet in a red line version. These amendments include exclusion of events associated with a home business from the ordinance, instead referring to the town zoning bylaw, adding celebration to event types, increasing the quantity of attendees on private property, requiring a permit to 40, addition to any lease or license agreement on town-owned property with organizations or individuals that make specific provisions regarding when a permit is required will apply when administering the ordinance, changes to the application requirements, increasing the attendance threshold of events to 200 people for select board review, addition of town public safety officials as parties that can revoke a permit. Those are the more the highlights, and there's some other minor changes, I believe, as well. But I can pause there with a general
Okay.
review.
So, yeah, let's pause there and ask if there is public input. People would like to make a statement, and if so, if you could either come up to the table, or we have a room microphone now, so you can stand if you want to. And if you could just identify yourself and give us your thoughts.
Come right up here, is that right?
Yeah, don't. He gets really mad. Don't touch that.
I'm, okay, my hearing's not great,
No, no,
sorry.
It'll pick you up right there.
Yeah.
What?
The microphone will pick up your
Oh,
voice
okay,
right
I don't have to touch it.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good, sorry.
So,
Yeah, my name's Michael Olson, I'm a Williston resident. I have a concern that the definition of a temporary event, as it stands in the proposed Article 3, should not include RZD at all. peace and quiet and freedom from unusual traffic should clearly be a priority in this zone. And I think basically Article 3 makes it pretty confusing, for me anyway, when I read it. This is particularly apparent given the examples itemized in Article 3. Parades, concerts, fairs, etc., are all too large to accommodate on-street parking in an RZD. This definition should include any event where direct or indirect sales or financial transactions or in-kind trading will occur, such as garage or other private sales. Article 5 seems to open the door for a series of temporary events to occur in an RZD, where there is no off-street parking available. As there are concerns about businesses such as Adams Market, Catamount, and Williston Country Club, they can all be specifically exempted from permitting requirements in Article 5 with the simple addition of an item F, and can include future businesses authorized by an application to the select board, provided off-street parking is sufficient for the new business. The bottom line is I don't think the residential zone should not be encumbered by temporary events, except for private celebrations and garage sales, which can be handled separately. That's really the extent of my comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Norman Rappaport, and I live at 160 Hickory Hill Road, Williston. Terry knows it. I've been a resident for 52 years, so I've seen it all, pretty much. And what concerns me is the fact that the noise is getting worse and worse, to the point where it affects the life of the people that live in these developments. Now, we have a lot of older developments in the town, and I live in one of them. We do not have any covenants, so this is one thing that may or may not be a problem. But what I'm concerned about is the way that the town is going when it comes to noise. You're now allowing chickens to be in a neighborhood. Well, it's not the chickens that make the noise so much, but if there's a rooster, then there's a problem, because they will not, well, they don't obey the noise ordinance, which is, I believe, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m., and that's okay to have noise, but in the nighttime, up till 6, we have garbage trucks or trash trucks that come before 6. That's a problem. We have a lot of people with noisy vehicles that go through the neighborhood. And I'm sure it's all the neighborhoods, not just mine. And that is another problem that I think should be looked at before you make any of these ordinances. And the one that we're talking about today, where I have a concern, is the fact that the thing that potentially bothers me is if you were to have a gathering of people in a neighborhood, God forbid there's a house fire. Think about trying to get one of our fire engines through those streets. They're narrow. And people park wherever they park on both sides of the street, and many times cars cannot get through. So that's a concern that I have. But I think that it's time to just consider the fact that if you're having a large gathering, that could be a problem in that respect. And that's pretty much what I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Nobody else in the room for the hearing, or is there anybody on?
Nope, and just staff and the newspaper.
So
Would it be helpful if I move to close the public hearing?
Need a
I
second?
did.
Oh, motion is made. Is there
Sec-
discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. Okay, and therefore the next item on the agenda is the temporary events ordinance amendment itself. So, what is the board's thoughts? What are their thoughts on the ordinance?
I think a temporary event should be a temporary, exactly as it is, 1 or 2 events where someone is having a graduation party or something, and not allow 12 events a year. I'm still against the 12 events a year.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm still uncomfortable with that many events. And I understand that the town thinks they can handle it, and that, you have one event and there's too much parking, emergency vehicles, we have to send the police, they get tow cars or get them to move it. Okay, we don't renew they can't have a second one, I guess is what the town would probably say right there, because they would have to come and ask for a second. If they had one thing and they wanted another one of their 12, they have to come 12 different times.
It would depend where the thresholds were met. And I think there's triggers built in for whether it's administrative approval or select board approval.
Right, if they had a series, if they were planning on doing it often, then they would have to get different approvals, but they'd have to come back and you'd have the opportunity to say, no, you didn't shut down your party early enough, you had, the parking was atrocious, whatever. So you feel like you could keep it from happening a second time if it was that inconvenient to the neighborhood. That you're thinking on why?
Yeah, that's how we've approached it. I think to date, since we've had this in place, for the most part, we've had a couple locations that have had multiple events. Comes to mind like Trucking Tuesdays at Adams Farm, Red Barn Gardens down Wilson Road has had some wedding events there. That have multiple. Then we've had kind of the block party, the wedding at a home, touch a truck event that's going to be coming up again. But I think those have been, just in a brief experience with this, those have been kind of the ones that have been multiple events that we've seen in the last year or so. Catamount Outdoor Family Center, which we're going to talk about later on the agenda, kind of how this fits into that part of their license agreement as well.
Right, but Catamount's not in the residential zone, and, right?
No, it's in ag
Rural, yeah. And, I asked Matt, like, how many, nobody wants to shut down Truckin' Tuesday, right? But it seems like you can count the number of businesses in the residential zone on 2 hands. And so you could, to this gentleman's point, you could exempt them pretty easily. If they're grandfathered in to have a business in the residential zone, you could easily, exempt them from the residential zone restrictions on here. So it's really just comes down to me, it kind of comes down to, we're saying it's okay to have 12 events in the residential zone because no one's ever going to have that many. So, that's fine until it happens, right? That's
And these events are happening every year, this is, these temporary events are going year after year after year after year.
Are you talking about like
multiple
Adams, or are you
times.
talking about people like in the residential zone?
Like Adams, I've got nothing against what they're doing, but like when I wanted to do 4 events in the fall, a fall festival, I went to the DRB and I got approved that way. Because it's a bit, I'm a business and I want to do something every fall 4 times a year. So I went to the DRB, that was required. I don't think a temporary event, I think, should be exactly what that is, a temporary event. Somebody wants to have, a party at their house, a graduation party, a birthday party, or something like that. To allow someone every year to continually come back and just get a temporary event, 12 events, up to 400 people, that's not a temporary event. That's a business event. That's plain and simple to me. I
The
don't understand how it can be called temporary.
We used to handle these through zoning, but the zoning was not as prescriptive to this, and we kind of got in the circle of how do we regulate these. So that's how the origin of this ordinance came to be, of how do we define it, how do we regulate it, how do we help, primarily for the public safety concerns and aspect. There's going to be a review lens, and discussions like this are important for the board and the town to think, how do you want to define that? And ordinance is a living piece of public policy. So, as you think about how you want to define it now, that could be today. We maybe probably a year from now we'll learn more about this ordinance as well as we think about our regulations in town.
What was the thought process behind 12, the number 12 in that?
I'm trying to recall how staff and the board landed on that number originally.
Is there something going on now that would not be allowed to go on because that we know?
Not that I'm aware of. I know for one, like for example, the Trucking Tuesdays event as a series, I believe over the summer they had about 8 or so on that property. I have to look at some cancellations but I'd have to look back on the meeting minutes to see just how that number came up with originally here.
I thought we had at one point in time, a year or a couple of years ago, where a business wanted to have a series of special events like every weekend. And I think it amounted to like 12. And we had some difficulty with trying to make sure that it worked for them and it worked for us. And I think that was part of the stimulus for getting a temporary events ordinance put out to begin with. So we've had it in effect for a little over a year now. And there were some problems that were identified and staff came up with some solutions for those. I'm sure that there'll be more things coming up in the future. Mr. Rappaport has mentioned some that could happen in the future. We should be taking a look at those things to see if we can make sure that we prevent those kind of things from happening in our ordinance.
There is a noise ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's I don't know how that would be acted upon immediately on weekend or something, but it is there.
Yeah, I think we have authority to essentially shut down an event if it's creating an issue. The noise ordinance, for a regulatory standpoint, our police department could be contacted, but always the challenge with the noise is it has to be kind of caught in the act. If it's if we're a business starting early for construction or waste pickup, if the town was made aware of it, we could follow up with that business to make them aware of our local regulation. But yeah, it's another piece of this as well. And before we have this ordinance, we tied to our catering permit, reminding people of the noise ordinance, saying, okay, if you're going to have a local liquor license, here's a reminder of our noise ordinance in town. The process became a bit convoluted, I'll say, trying to look at these different layers and for those type of events. This helps package it into one regulation, but to the board's point, it's a living document, so certainly staff will take feedback in the direction the board wants to do with this.
And actually, I don't. I'm embarrassed that I'm not completely sure about this, but we did not allow chicken coops.
No, right.
They're
Not in residences.
not in the
no.
residential areas.
Right.
There's, I know the planning commission is currently talking about chickens again as part of a bylaw amendment, but they haven't finished that conversation.
Have been considered. But but they're not supposed to in the residential. Well, I encourage you to. Okay.
I thought it was 4 hens, no roosters.
Not even.
I don't know.
I mean, that was Harry That was our, it was a contentious issue for a while.
It was.
First assignment when I started working for the town was sticking to the chicken regulation.
Yeah, yeah.
Vermont, so much.
So I think, no, we're a very anti-chicken residential town. So if somebody's doing that, I'll leave it to your common sense on how to react to that, but,
May I say something?
yeah.
Go on. The reason why I brought that up was because last week I was here and I mentioned my concern about the fact that in the more populated areas of the town, and particularly around Taft's Corner, you have an awful lot of people. More so, it's much more dense area than in the rural parts of town. If someone were to have chickens in the rural part of the town, it makes more sense because that is more room for the chickens to do their thing. And it really wouldn't bother anybody. But can you imagine the way this ordinance was written that I read last week? That way that was written, it says that somebody who lives in Taft's Corners could have a chicken coop. You could interpret that regulation that way. That makes no sense to me. And that's where I was coming from then, but that was kind of glossed over. And I think that fact that the town is becoming noisier, not, because of traffic, because of cars starting in the morning and going through in the morning, and 20 minutes to 6 to have a trash truck come through the neighborhood. It's a bit early. So, these things are only getting worse. That's why I came. I wanted to make somebody aware that the town is becoming more populated. Because it's more populated, it's obviously more noise. And it's something that really ought to be looked at. I don't know what could be done. I'm not saying that the police need to be more reactive to it, but something should be done to make sure that people are a little more considerate. I'll put it that way. I'll say it that way. Because people have a lot of cars with very loud engines. They start them up. I have a neighbor who starts his car at 4 o'clock in the morning, go to work. Well, I can't blame him for that, but that's just the way it is. But it's just as a general trend. That's all I wanted to say. Okay?
Yep. Just the chicken ordinance that's online actually failed. That there is an ordinance that you can look up online that says chickens, that talks about chickens being allowed in Williston, but that did not get a majority of the vote, so that's not the law. Yeah.
I do believe the planning commission is having a conversation related to chickens now, but that hasn't gone through their committee yet.
Because there were people before it.
Yeah. There was a surprising amount of passion on that issue.
Oh, yes.
So, back on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So chicken, kind of a highlight of my career. I can't really, I really appreciate all the work the staff's done with sort of our continual revisiting this, and they've been very supportive of making some changes, but I just really can't get over having 12 events allowed in the residential district outside of those small handful of businesses that we could exempt. So, I can't support it as it's written because I think that's too much. I think it's true that our residential districts need to be a little more protected, and just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean we should allow it to happen. Just where I stand right now. I think it's an easy fix if we wanted to fix it.
I agree with Gene.
Further questions or comments? So it is on the agenda for action tonight. If there is a motion, if there's not, that's the board's prerogative as well. But I think I'd call to we'll call the question, so to speak, and ask if there is a motion to be made.
I'll move to adopt amendments to the temporary events ordinance as presented.
Now second it.
Is there further discussion? I'm also concerned about the 12 times per calendar year. I'm inclined to not wait. I'm inclined to support it as is, but I do think that's something that we should very seriously revisit in the short term. But that's my comment. Okay, is there any other question or comment?
The 12, though, wasn't, and this was not an addition in this revision. The 12 has been consistent through the original version as well, right?
Correct. That language is as adopted in April of 22.
But we did bump it up from 20 people to 40.
Correct.
So it's twice as many people could go to those events, but that event number is.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. Okay. Next on the agenda, licensing agreement, Catamount Outdoor Family Center. Simon, are you going to be making a presentation?
I could briefly provide an introduction for the board, so a couple of members from the first time this was brought up. So our license agreement with Catamount is up. Our initial agreement with the Outdoor Family Center on the property, October of this year. Work began last summer to review the license agreement. Simon, who staffs our Conservation Commission and Catamount Forest Committee, working with their board and the committee's staff to look at it with our experience over the last almost 5 years with the license agreement since the town acquired the property. So Simon came to the board last December to give a general update where things were on that license agreement update. One of the items the board at the time had consensus behind was looking at a 10-year agreement rather than a 5-year agreement. There were some outstanding issues to resolve at that point where that draft stood, primarily looking at this idea of events as well on the property related to how to regulate events on that property in relation to the temporary events ordinance as well. So as a lot of work's been taking place with staff and their board and the town attorney and thinking through some ways to approach that from a license agreement standpoint over the past several months, and a few additional outstanding issues that Simon's worked on as well. So for the intent for tonight for the board is to get a general overview of the license agreement proposal, get your feedback on it. If you have any questions, consensus for further revisions to go through this, and then staff will bring a version back to the board for potential action coming up here. With the sequencing here, we'd look to probably have that back before the board later this summer, early this fall. So I'll turn it over to Simon to walk through his presentation.
Thank you, Eric. I think Eric gave a pretty good intro as to the background and how we reached where we were in December and where we are now. And I know that some of you weren't here when we talked about this previously, so I'm just going to run through the various changes that have been made since the original license agreement was agreed back in 2019, which I'm sure you know was actually signed at the same time the town acquired the property. So as Eric already mentioned, the term has been extended from 5 to 10 years. That was something requested by the Outdoor Family Centre to provide them with more stability, allow them to do better planning, help them attract and retain staff, and also make capital improvements in the property. That was one of the main issues we discussed with the Catamount Management Committee. I'm going to have to be careful with my Catamounts here. The Catamount Management Committee, and they were very supportive. They actually noted they'd heard very few complaints about the way that the family centre had been running the property in their 5 years, so that was good news. We did include an additional clause in the term, which was the family centres give us 1 year's notice if they don't intend to renew at the end of this term. And that's to allow the town time to figure out what we want to do with the property if they're not going to be staying on after 10 years. A change that was made in response to concerns about pedestrians checking in was to clarify and sort of crystallize in the license that both parties do find it necessary to encourage people to do that. The main reason is it's helpful for the town and the family centre to understand how many people are using the property, helps with planning. It also helps getting people sign the family centre waiver, and it also does reflect what we said we should be doing in our forest management plan. Those of you who don't know, the sort of the use and the goals of the forest are set out in the forest management plan. That was something that was drafted by residents of the town to control what can take place, and that sits with a ream of other documents that regulate the use of the property, including the conservation easement, their discretionary permit for the property, the temporary events ordinance, which you just discussed, and so on, and this license. And the license very much flows from the management plan. On that end, we did include an additional clause just to provide clarity to everyone involved about the types of uses that are allowed on the property, which are really just educational, recreational, and sort of competitive and other events. That's really just to provide clarity and make sure we are referring to the correct document when we receive inquiries from people but about the types of things that we may or may not permit on the property. And if any changes requested to that, that would have to go through the consultative process of updating the forest management plan, which would require public consultation and be reported back to the select board. We included some additional language on the trails. As part of this license, we do delegate maintenance of the trails to the family centre. They're doing a great job on that for us. But there are a few things that the town can go in and do or should do with regard to the trails. So really that was a request from the family centre that they have a voice in the standards that we work to. And staff felt that it was only fair if we are expecting them to take on the maintenance of the trail, whilst we retain sort of final say of the standard, that we do take on board what their comments are. And that also has benefits from the town, and there's a lot of sort of knowledge and historic background experience and expertise in trail management that we do benefit from if we do a trail project down there. As Eric mentioned, one of the main changes we've made is to how the license interacts with the temporary event process, which was adopted last year. Bit of a unique situation the Catamount Family Centre has, in that they're sort of an external body who has a license on town land, and a large part of what they do is to hold events. They have a discretionary permit that reflects that, but there has been problems and a sort of a lack of clarity over the thresholds that we are applying when they will need a a temporary event permit. And really that's created a lot of work for town staff and outdoor family centre staff in sort of figuring out and getting through that process as to what does and doesn't need a temporary event. So where we've landed is we've sought to provide clarity for all involved and to sort of move from a process of sort of managing and commenting on sort of everything they do to create a framework for them to work within, which sets out what the town's expectations are and also what our safeguards are to protect our position. And this really reflects the fact that, unlike, say, a private business or someone who owns their land and is asking for a temporary event permit, we do have a sort of a landlord relationship with them, and they have sort of got 5 years track record of working well with the town and managing this property for us. So what that does is it provides sort of higher and clearer thresholds than was on the temporary events ordinance. If they don't breach those, They don't need to apply for a temporary event permit. And those thresholds were arrived at sort of through staff experience of administering the temporary event ordinance with this outdoor family centre. We also have the criteria that the town manager can approve their temporary event permits for those that do need them, or can refer them to the select board. We've removed the requirement from an annual list and instead require them to keep an up-to-date website that has a calendar of their events and also provide us with an annual report for the preceding year of everything that happened on the property. That's really to sort of recognise that the whole sort of planning of future events was becoming a time-consuming and ultimately of limited value process, dealing with the temporary events. So we're moving towards them dealing with temporary events through the way I described with the thresholds, keeping us up to date so we know what's going on with their website, and also briefing us at the end of the year as to what happened. And then lastly, on temporary events, we do have some guidance in there, the request of the fire department on burn permits and campfires, restricting them to their fire pits. And then lastly, an outstanding action to develop some additional criteria by which we'll make sure the fire department are aware of events that are happening so they can plan around availability of EMS and UTV availability, because I think there are some events that may fall below the threshold where the fire department want to know that something's happening up there, but it might not necessarily necessitate a full temporary event permit. I'm getting towards the end. There is additional allowances for them to close the trails, which wasn't in the previous license, where there's the spring thaw or they're getting abused. They do need to tell us when they've done that, and that was a change that was made back in December. Since then, we've had the ability to road test it through one spring thaw, and they've been very diligent in reporting when those trails are closed to us. And then lastly, we sort of looked at the parking lot. There was a desire expressed at the Catamount Management Committee that it be kept open at all times to allow those people who might otherwise recreate on the trails to recreate on Governor Chittenden Road during the spring thaw. The town doesn't actually have a policy to keep that parking lot open. We also can't resource sort of prioritising ploughing it and also monitoring it for safety. So where we reached, which is a sort of agreement with the outdoor family centre, is they do have the ability to close it. They can't close it unnecessarily. We want to keep it open whenever possible. And we clearly define the criteria by which they can do it if the parking lot is dangerous and if there's potential for widespread trail damage that they can't control through purely closing the trails. Again, they do have to notify us ASAP so that we can go up there if we feel it's necessary and check that it's not been closed unnecessarily. So I think that was it. That's just the main points that I wanted to highlight. Hope to hear your comments. We've got a few things to work through with the Outdoor Family Centre. We can take on board your comments and then, as Eric mentioned, report it back later for a decision.
Questions for Simon?
More of a general question. Is there any contention between the number of events that are going on there? Events, most of them, at least that I'm aware of, tend to be for mountain bikers, runners or something. The number of events versus just somebody wanting to go up there and just walk on the trails?
So that is a good question. And you made me realise that I skipped over one element of my presentation, which was to talk about the safeguards. You may remember I talked about establishing a framework for them to operate in and safeguards. So that is actually one of the safeguards we have. So we have a safeguard by which if we feel that events aren't being managed properly, we can change those thresholds when a temporary event permit is required, and they're then required to go through the process. To your point, we also have where we feel that sort of the quantity or nature of events that are taking place have become so much, it's starting to interfere with pedestrian use or the town holding their events. We will meet with them to discuss changes to their operational procedure, and the town can direct those changes to make sure that we're not, well, that the town can hold its events that it wants to hold, but also so that the pedestrian right of access, which is actually something that the conservation easement protects, as well as the forest management plan, are not forgotten about and are respected. So thanks for pointing that out. I did mean to address that, but I skipped right over.
Looking at the website, it looks like you've got events every day. I mean, you're doing a good job, you know?
Yeah, well, it's yeah.
Are you looking at doing anything beyond, you know, like trail running and?
So the outdoor family center, those are my majority outdoor family center events, and so there's a lot of cycling, mountain biking, and then also sort of hiking and running events. One thing that the family center have recently been doing over the last year or so is creating a more like a naturalist approach to their events. So as well as doing what you might associate the outdoor family center with, which is, you know, kids on bikes, running races, mountain biking. There's also things like fungi forays, going out and looking at mushrooms and fungi that they're running, and, you know, tick talks, learning how to sort of be aware of ticks. And I know that, you know, they run camps every year. So one of the things they're looking to do with their camp counselors is, as well as like making sure they understand the safety of the kids and getting them on mountain bikes and things like that, is also educating them about the forest and how important it is to manage it.
I think those are all really great things, you know, what you're doing. I think that's a real benefit to the town of Williston and the surrounding area. I didn't really understand what you meant about temporary event permits.
So that was something. So they do have a strong events aspect to what they do. It's something that was allowed from the discretionary permit. However, the town, there is some events that are large enough. They do require additional scrutiny, either by the town manager or the select board. So they do occasionally. They don't have many of them, but they do occasionally have like a 300 or 400 person event. And that goes beyond, you know, their regular race series or, you know, 150 person kids ski event. That's something that we need to think about a little bit more carefully. It's a big property, but, you know, 400 or 500 people is a lot of people. So we want to make sure we give that the sort of due consideration it needs. And then there are also some other aspects that will, you know, always require a temporary event. You know, if they are proposing to serve alcohol, or they've got sort of overnight camping or something like that, that does need them to come back for a temporary event permit.
I just wonder, when I hear temporary event permit, if you're going to be getting into weddings and, I don't know, just different types, you know, party events instead of biking and hiking.
So they would only be allowed to hold events that are allowed for in the forest management plan. So the forest management plan does not allow them to hold weddings. They couldn't hold like a graduation party. They could hold, you know, a meetup for people who are mountain biking. That would be a sort of an acceptable thing if they are mountain biking, but they couldn't hold weddings or something along those lines, not without changing the forest management plan.
Or they're on mountain bikes.
Like, what if the Burlington Beer Company sponsored a mountain bike race with beer?
Well, that would need to come back because they're serving alcohol. But I think, so one of the things that we spent quite a lot of time thinking about is that we're sort of built this relationship with them. And we do have these safeguards which allows us to claw back things. So the onus is on them to make sure they're adhering to what we view an appropriate use and what the forest management plan says is an appropriate use. So, you know, loaning people bikes to have a Burlington Beer Festival event would not be appropriate. That's a workaround. That's not acceptable. You know, I think they have one where it's a cyclocross day for Green Mountain cyclocross. And so people are going there for the cyclocross event, but I think they do have a beer tent there as well, which is sort of an accessory to the mountain biking use. And for that, they got a special event permit or temporary event permit.
So that's where the temporary event permit comes in that we discussed last.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion was what is kind of the day-to-day use of the property with thresholds of people and parking impact versus what are these larger events on the property, and where do those thresholds lie? That was a lot of a conversation, and Simon for his work and leading those, because it was a lot of details to working through and trying to unpack what a draft approach would be here in this license agreement.
You know, I think I think it's such a perfect place over there. It's such a great resource for the town. I don't want it to become a commercial resource. You know, I think it's great. They do mountain bike racing, and they, you know, encourage people to ride their bike and hike. And, you know, Ethan Tapper takes people, you know, watching birds. I think that's what it's for. But all of a sudden commercialize this place and have beer tents and parties and everything going on over there. You know, we've paved over enough Williston. I don't want to see that started down the road to paving that place either. I think it's important to keep it wilderness wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that would all go back to the forest management plan and the conservation easement. You know, those core tenets for the property is public access, recreation access, enjoying nature of the property. So those are certainly things that we looking to make sure are safeguarded and protected in how we write this license agreement. Safeguards to claw back who feel that's pushing too far away from what the intent and the license or rather the conservation easement and the management plan are saying about the property.
Thank you.
Who does who makes that decision, or makes that, what's the authority,
Just
the body that makes the decision that like this event is too much, is going to get rejected, or your trend is going in the wrong direction? What would that look like?
Yeah, it would be, so we have,
I mean, for some, who would say this looks more like a party that you have a few mountain bikes at, as opposed to mountain biking with a few beers at?
yeah, it would be part of the staff review with it. And I think, Simon, as part of this, they'd keep us apprised of kind of what their schedule is, so that the intent with that was us to say, okay, what's this event about? We need a little more information to understand what the scope of this event is about and what the intent of this event is about. Kind of having that back and forth to understand what the uses are on an ongoing basis.
So it's staff is tasked with determining if we're following the plan or not, of course.
Correct. And we'd also be assisted with that with the management committee. They're people who go to Catamount regularly and are very aware of what's happening down there.
You're in that committee, aren't you? Didn't we appoint?
Yeah,
Mike?
yeah. I believe I am.
The select board, the conservation commission, and the recreation and parks committee have membership on that town committee.
Okay, thank you.
Gotta make sure I pay attention.
Yeah, got to read all those documents.
Other questions or comments? Feedback?
Those seem like reasonable changes. When you said they give us a year before, if they choose not to renew
Yeah.
at the end, I assume somewhere in this, sorry, I looked through it, but I really have trouble reading red line things. This gives me a headache, but say in 6 years they decide they're not going to do it anymore.
Well, I mean, both sides have
Like a 30-day,
the ability to
yeah,
terminate, we can't make them run the family.
right,
centre.
exactly.
But, I think it would be a question for the town, I think in the short term, we'd have to dial down what happens up there pretty significantly because it would fall back on our staff and it would become more of a country park. We may be able to find another alternative.
No, I was just thinking about like, they're gonna give us a year before
Yeah.
at 10 years, but I kind of like them to give us a year at any point within
Right.
the 10 years as well. But I'm sure you've talked to them enough that,
Yeah.
that we'd find out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we have to undergo an RFP process. Let's see if there's another.
Yeah, no, I mean, it'd be a big thing. It's like, yeah, it's, yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I think that's a clear steer, so we'll progress with that.
A couple final details to shore up, I think, with the fire EMS details, so
Yeah.
between the Catamount committee and their board, so I have to look to get this back before the select board, probably next month or so, maybe, September timeline, just see how things line.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.
Next item, bond sale documents.
It's a hefty packet.
Light reading.
So this is for the ambulance that the voters approved last town meeting day. It was delivered this past June. We're looking to close on a bond sale that's going to be going in early August. Our town attorney, our bond counsel has prepared the necessary documentation for the select board to consider. We've been approved to participate in the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank Summer Pool that's coming up to close in August. The first principal payment for this will be due in November of 2024 and first interest payment due in May of 25. So these will be baked into our fiscal year 2025 budget this fall for review. The select board is required to authorize the bond sale documents as prepared by the town attorney. I had a draft motion in my agenda, but town attorney added a few more language to it, so I'm sure that would tarry, but prior to that, if there's any questions from staff, I'll probably refer to Shirley as well, because she's reviewed these with the town attorney.
So when you're ready for a motion, I have it.
Are there questions for Eric before we proceed? So if there is a motion.
So I'll have, the following motion is, having seen and reviewed the resolution and certificate and attachments to it related to the issuance of the town's $280,000 general obligation bond and its sale to the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, I hereby move the adoption and approval of the resolution and certificate as presented.
Second.
Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Motion carries.
I'll circulate a couple documents for the board. This first one is the actual resolution and certificate. Yep. The last page has places for the select board to sign, and let the treasurer and clerk attest to it. And then we have a loan agreement that the town attorney has prepared as well. And there's the order here. Tab it for me. Ted, the first sign here has a spot just for the chair to sign.
Okay.
And then further along here is a page for the full board to sign.
Sorry.
Just make sure I don't miss any spots for the board. Yeah, that's later on the receipt and the treasurer. So, yep, there's one for just Ted, and then the second one's for
So who's the clerk?
Sarah Mason will sign that.
Better. A little more heft on that one.
Exhibits that
Okay.
To go down to Boston.
Practice. It wasn't arm day today, so.
For riveting television.
Signing bond.
Well, it was, we really peaked at chicken, so.
Yeah.
It was just all downhill from there.
Our audience.
Not as bad as it is. Not really full signatures. I had to do this once during COVID and we had everybody on the board, everybody, 12, 13 members sign it and like get facts back. We thought we were all set. And then the bank said, no, and he went. I had to drive all over the freaking county.
Wow.
To get hand signatures.
Oh.
How do you even know?
I started having people sign in blue ink and,
Yeah.
and then scan it perfectly back in color scan. Like,
Yeah.
and I probably shouldn't say this in front, but I told judges it was to get things filed in court from judges who needed original signatures. By the way, the judges are making up their own law on that, but whatever.
Ooh.
I didn't phrase it that way.
You just said, here, yes, sir, here you
Yeah.
go.
Okay, next item, the waiver of the VELCO notice requirements.
Yep, we were approached by Vermont Electric Power Company, or VELCO, has a project plan of the Taft Corner substation that's behind Old Navy in town. And this work be performs limited in scope. It's designed to improve system reliability and load restoration time for emergencies. Project does not change the substation footprint. VELCO is seeking a waiver of the 45-day advance filing requirement from the Public Utilities Commission hearing as this is allowed under state law. The attorney for VELCO has advised the Select Board and Planning Commission would need to grant such a waiver on the town's behalf. The Planning Commission discussed this last week and supported the waiver. This is before the Select Board this evening to consider. I have a draft motion. I've included an email correspondence with Planning Director Matt Belanger and some pictures of the work they're going to do. If the board had any additional questions, I can reach out to VELCO's attorney. They'd give me contact information to reach out.
Questions?
So the 45 days, I assume, is in case a neighbor has a concern about the project?
Yeah, I
And the
believe so.
neighbor is the interstate and the state police barracks? That's
Yeah.
pretty much it,
For
right?
public comment
Right,
concerning
right.
the changes.
And so would it, are we shortening the waiver, or we just no waiver at all?
I believe no waiver at all. Actually, let me just double check this. They're going to have a hearing still, the Public Utilities Commission.
Oh.
So this is a waiver of the 45-day advance filing requirement preceding the hearing. So the hearing will occur, but I think it's making it be able to occur sooner. It is my recommendation.
And in terms of, I mean, it says that the footprint of this doesn't change. It's just changing the nature of how things exist on that footprint. So,
Yeah, that's my understanding. I've seen some of the pictures.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it, okay.
The structure.
And my very limited knowledge of any of this, what this is.
That's why they send pictures with big arrows.
Yes, that was helpful, actually. I was like, I don't know what any of it is,
Be
so,
a different language to
yeah.
power substations.
And staff would include Bruce Hoare, correct? Probably. He'd be the only one that would have any
Not directly with Public Works, just because it's a power supply and they don't oversee that component of it. But, I didn't chat with Bruce about this directly, but I don't anticipate he'd have any objection to it.
He seems to be a man with a lot of knowledge
Yeah.
on what's going on. I respect his, his ability. Yeah,
Absolutely.
So
he knows a lot.
further questions or comments? If not, then is there a motion?
I'll move to waive the 45-day advanced filing requirement for the Vermont Electric Power Company Taft Corners Substation Project to the Public Utilities Commission and authorize the chair of the select board to sign the waiver.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. It brings us up to manager's report.
I forgot to print out the actual waiver, so I'll print that. Sign it. All right, satisfy that requirement. See, I don't have it in my written report, but I wanted to provide for the board an update on damage from July storms. Sure, at the last meeting, the flooding that we saw on North Williston Road and Governor Chittenden Road down onto Route 2 and on River Cove Road as well. Thanks again to our staff who've been able to reopen those roadways. It just, it fails in comparison to what we're seeing around the state. I was visiting family in central Vermont over the weekend just to see what Barry and Montpelier are doing. It's very, very overwhelming to see. But closer to home here, we had another rain event 2 Sundays ago, and it really greatly impacted Butternut Road in town and also Christmas Tree Lane. I'll share a couple pictures if I get this to work here. So we're looking, there we go. We're looking at Butternut Road here, and what occurred. Another version.
Gonna need the 4-wheel drive school bus.
So we had to keep this road closed for multiple days. We had a contractor come in to assist with getting this road reopened with our staff. We also had damage, Christmas Tree Lane, we had a culvert we needed to replace. And throughout all these storm events, additional work on South Road, Oak Hill and South Road intersection, as mentioned, River Cove Road, Lincoln Hill Road, and we had to provide assistance to our North Wilson Road pump station at times, being a bit overwhelmed with runoff that was coming into it. But have septic keep on, I think we pulled 50,000 gallons of water out of the pump station. We don't want to get overwhelmed with water there. So as we're looking right now in the county, I think in talking with Bruce, our Public Works Director, the county is very much on the brink of reaching a threshold of damage for FEMA eligibility for reimbursement for these. So staff has diligently, since this first event happened, been tracking their time and materials and also other damages, including these emergency repairs that we need to do to get these roads reopened. So to give the board a ballpark estimate on these damage costs, including some staff time and equipment, we're looking at close to $200,000 in damage from these events. If we do get the FEMA designation and we apply for that, historically FEMA has reimbursed communities about 80% of that. In talking with Bruce, the state has historically also reimbursed another 10 to 12%, leaving towns, the 8 to 10% remaining of just local funding to pick that up. FEMA is a long road to get that reimbursement. That can take multiple years. So if we do get that designation and we'll follow and apply for it, we'll see that cash come back. It will be a little waiting period, I anticipate. So the board's aware that's kind of what we're seeing with an impact to get our infrastructure reopened and reestablished from these storm events. And my hat goes off to our public works staff and coordinating with our emergency services to keep them updated on what was going on and to get these roads reopened and maintain our water wastewater systems as we dealt with these events that are 100-year storms.
Decade.
Realities that we're seeing with climate change. I think I had to remind our next select board meeting is one meeting in August on August 15th, coming up in a couple weeks here. And we also have the April finance report included in this packet. And Shirley, did you have anything additional you wanted to share there, or any questions from the board on the finance report?
Thanks for the yellow highlight. Thanks for the yellow highlights.
Yes.
I can definitely see them now.
Questions. I will let you know that you will not get May reports. I have not been behind as far as I was this year, and once I opened the fiscal year 24, and we have a limitation with our system, and it doesn't matter what day I post something, I can't go back and produce financials for anything other than June. So I post entries, they still look like June 30th entries. So other than spending hours and hours trying to get manual balances as of May to do budget and actual, I won't be able to do it. So, yeah. You had that problem too?
Kind of a moot point.
Yeah. But
We'll be closing FY 23 next week officially, right, August 3rd, last day we're gonna pay any invoices.
right, that's, we're trying to close AP, but we still look at big invoices that come in and still post those back. But, so we already are working on month end, year end. We've already done some reconciliations, but unfortunately a lot depends on AP closing to keep moving forward. So we are in the process.
I was trying to keep track of all your, this will be a little bit better, this will be a little bit worse,
Yeah,
a little bit better. I think we're still okay at your end
yeah,
because of the revenue.
yeah, because of the revenue.
Right.
More questions? Further questions?
Eric spoke about the storm damage a couple of weeks ago on Sunday night. I'd just like to thank the Williston Fire Department. Our neighbors on the corner of South Road and Oak Hill Road, their basement was 4 feet and rising very quickly.
Wow.
You know, a 1-inch sump pump wasn't unable to keep up with that, and they called the fire department. The fire department came over immediately. You know, the larger hose, and they were able to pump their basement out, save their basement. And everybody was very grateful, you know, the Williston Fire Department.
I'll certainly pass that on. It showed me they were able to move the water to an open field nearby. So that was, yeah, great deal.
I wonder if it was lack of a culvert between, you know, South Road and South. I don't believe there's a culvert there, and I think it just backed up and it overflowed, and they actually had Oak Hill Road closed for a while. It was quite the storm.
Yeah.
It was.
But
That's it? Okay. Other business?
3 catering permits,
Okay.
all at the Isham Family Barn.
Aha.
One is, I'll do them chronological order. August the 12th, it's a wedding event. September the 2nd is a wedding event. And September the 9th is another wedding event. All by the same caterer, I believe. 802 cocktails. 802 cocktails for all 3. Staff has no concerns with this application.
Given that, is there a motion?
Move to approve,
Is there a
all
second?
3.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstaining? One abstention. Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Okay. Item last, final thoughts on agenda items from this meeting. Are there any follow-up thoughts?
I saw Chief Foley, it brought, you know, it triggered a memory. The Essex Police Department has a Citizens Academy. You know, I've had some friends go to that Citizens Academy. It's 8 weeks long, 3 hours a week. And they really gained a lot of insight into the police department, you know, and help. They learn, you know, about the police, what they do. It was very interesting, they said. And it's also used as a recruitment device for the police department to, you know, get people interested in the police department to come. And it just sounds like it's a real successful program. You know, I just encourage everyone to look into it.
Okay.
Cool.
You know, made me think of that with the Howard Mental Health Center here
Yeah.
today and everything. But, you know, like I said, it's 8 weeks long, it's 3 hours a week.
It's like a real commitment.
Right, it is, but, you know, it's something, that, you know, it just brings a lot of good publicity to the police department.
I understand.
People get to see exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Any other items?
Can we pencil in maybe on this long list of future policy issues to revisit this 12 events in the
Yeah.
residential zone?
Yeah.
Or come up with a date that we thought we could maybe bring it back?
Maybe get an update, 3 to 6 months from now. Okay. Anything else? Hearing nothing. We are adjourned.